Welcome to the Till Books Do Us Part podcast. I'm Justin.
And I'm Jackie. Join us each week as we, a husband and wife duo, deep dive and discuss your favorite books.
Hey, Jack.
Hey, Justin.
Hey, guys. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to episode 7 of our Onyx Storm coverage.
That's right. We're covering chapters 30 through 33 this week.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting better.
It does.
They're fun chapters.
We're going to another aisle.
We are. We're going to another aisle. Shit's going to get real. We're going to be fighting.
Mm-hmm.
People are getting stabbed. We're meeting people's mamas. We're meeting people with the same hair. We got all types of colors to talk about.
Probably need to do a spoiler warning.
Damn. If you ain't know that shit, spoiler alert. You shouldn't be fucking listening to this, for real. You really just shouldn't. Either way, we're going to cover stuff from possibly from Fourth Wing and Iron Flame and all of Onyx Storm.
Yeah, I can't imagine somebody just like randomly choosing this episode where it says like episode 7, Onyx Storm in the chapters.
And then being pissed about it, right? And being like, hey, motherfucker, I was listening to episode 7, chapters 30 through 33, and you fucking ruined it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, partner. You're doing shit backwards. All right. Well, before we get started, we're going to go ahead and ask for attention, please. We like our attention on Instagram at TillBooksPod. We also enjoy attention on TikTok at till.books.pod. We love that attention.
I hate that you describe it as attention because I hate that so much.
It's so uncomfortable to say follow us on social media. I just tried to make a goofy joke.
It way worse.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's funny because that's really what we're doing. And everybody knows.
Yeah. As an introvert, the idea of saying I love attention is just horrifying.
Love it. Give me those likes.
We do like chatting with you guys.
We do like chatting. Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and start with the summary for Chapter 30. We got to get to Umbriel.
We got to get there.
So Violet and Xaden are woken to quite a few soldiers who are definitely questioning their presence on the Isle. Xaden requests an audience with the Queen, and while at first they say no, Violet did her studying, and they tell them that they know they can enter court if they challenge someone. They are escorted to the city, and it doesn't take long for Violet to notice something very specific about the attendants.
Very specific indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we get to those specific things, I would love to read Major Rory's Guide to Appeasing the Gods.
You would like to read it? Here.
Sure, I'll read it. Here, tell me that. All right, so this is from Major Rory's Guide to Appeasing the Gods, 2nd edition. Okay, so who knows what happened to the 1st edition? That was probably more of the truth.
Well, and I tried looking for that in Iron Flame, and I think that we didn't get this particular text until Onyx Storm.
Okay,
All right. I don't think we saw any excerpts from it in Iron Flame.
Okay, all right, good tip. So what it says is, it is unwise to favor one god above another. Better to shun them all than show favoritism amongst a jealous pantheon. There's a word in between there that I can't pronounce, and it starts with a prodigious. Whatever. Prodigious. Okay. I don't know. It's a jealous one. So when I read this, I think it's propaganda, right? Well, because we're in the Isles. Mm-hmm. And obviously each Isle kingdom favors a god.
Right.
Right? So Navarre doesn't. Like Amari or whatever is like the queen of the gods, but like they have Malik, they have temples, they thank Zanal for luck. Like they show their respect, I guess. They don't technically favor any of them, maybe. They just think Amari is the queen of all the gods.
Right.
Whereas the Isle Kingdoms obviously have one that they favor. So when I see this, most of them, I think more propaganda from Navarre. In case anybody gets out into the real world, whatever the case is, they've been taught like, oh, see, they're favoring, they're bad. They're not, the gods don't like that. The gods like what you're doing.
Yeah, and that is, again, assuming that this text, the Major Rory's Guide, comes from Navarre, which I thought, first reading it, that was the case. But now, if it is the case that it's not in Iron Flame at all, then it's like we don't know where this text came from. And that's kind of a big thing about a lot of these excerpts is that sometimes we can very obviously see where it comes from. But there are others where, like, it could be from Poor Meal. Like, she's getting all these texts from the Queen there. It could be from the Isles. Like, she has visited the Isles now. And Deverelli, like, she visited that bookstore. Like, she got her dad's text, but who's to say she didn't get other ones, too?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we've pointed that out before. Like, we don't always know so we assume a lot it's from Navarre. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, being written by a major, I think it's more likely that it's either from Navarre or Port-Miel.
Sure, yeah. But we don't know. So, all right, either way, let's get into the chapter. So we start off with some arriving troops. And first, Violet and the gang, they see a couple dozen on horseback, and they got swords and daggers, right? So it's, what you would expect landing in a foreign land.
Right.
You're going to have some people come visit you.
Especially on the one that worships the god of war.
Yeah, for sure. So beyond the couple dozen on horseback, they can see roughly an entire platoon, right? And
which is how much?
American military, 40 to 50, give or take.
Okay. Thanks for that insight.
Yeah, man. Terran, however, can see 2 full companies in the hills.
Which is how much?
A company, roughly 200, 220, something like that. So another 400.
Holy moly.
In the hills.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So not a small group. They are heavily outnumbered. So this military, or whoever we want to call them, the troops, they all appear similar size, wearing the same emblem, same build, same haircuts. So I don't know much about foreign militaries outside of American military, but that sounds a lot like American military. Same build, not so much anymore. Very long time ago, yes. If you're in the air wing fighter pilots, stuff like that, they have to be certain heights. You know what I mean? They can't be tall people. So that's what it made me think of. Like very uniformed, very strategic army.
Yeah, but it said even despite their sex, they're the same build. Like that seems odd to me because either you're only choosing people who fit this physical description to participate, but I mean, it's an isle, so how can they possibly have but so many people to choose from?
Right.
Or they're like breeding people specifically to be the same size.
So sometimes the best people at what they do, the advantage is their size. A horse jockey. Average horse jockey's 4'10" to 5'1". Right. For a reason. Like they're great. Again, I was talking about like pilots. Not so much nowadays. Like your airline pilot, yeah, dude can be 6'4" if he wants. That's crazy. Cool, sure. World War II, B-52 bombers. There's guys in the bottom that are fighting, right, in a little ball. They cannot be big. They have to be like less than 5'5", 5'4", something like that. They're good at what they do. So when I see this, that's what I think.
Well, but I get the impression that these are like all big people.
I think, I do too.
And again, especially later, and we'll talk about it, like the descriptions of the people they're fighting are wild.
Right. Agreed. And again, the description of the fighters, like you said, being big, like even the female fighter, which we're going to find out is the queen, is like huge. A giant compared to Violet. So either way, these horseback guys, they're coming up, guys and gals are coming up like, yo, you land on our island. What's up? Having the conversation. But the captain doesn't realize that the dragons are here. I don't know what the thought of how they arrived here was, but didn't realize there were some dragons. Either way, now they know, and they're like, oh, our bad. And Xaden says, we want an audience with the queen.
Which they tell them no at first. They tell them they're not worthy of meeting with the queen.
Right.
And it was a lot of even particular judgment about Violet's size, which is extra interesting, knowing that this is where her dad took her as a toddler. And I don't know if it would have been like a normal thing for people to, bring disabled children, children with some sort of physical, issues here. I just thought that was
and we don't really know what dedicating them means and stuff like that. We still have a lot of unanswered questions, I think, for sure. But either way, the guys here at Umbriel, they're like, hey, the only way you're getting an audience is to basically have this combat challenge, right? And they already knew that coming in, that this was going to be part of what they were probably going to have to do. So challenge their best to combat, and you can earn a seat, with the queen. But only half of the dragons and half of the riders are going to be allowed to come. So they basically say, you guys can come and do this challenge, but, pick a handful, and that's all that gets to come.
And they make Violet pick.
Right. So she chooses Xaden to challenge, right? Because he's obviously the best fighter. She chooses Ark to speak for Navarre because she believes you got to have royalty. That's obviously why he's here, not Holden. She chooses Kat as a representative from Port-Miel, and then Dane and herself. And I don't remember
translating.
Okay, I was about to say I don't remember exactly what Dane's was. And she leaves Garrick and Mira amongst some of the others here.
Yeah, Drager and Marin.
Right.
Yeah.
So they end up arriving at, I guess it's Estol. Estol, I think. It's Eistol.
Yeah.
That's the capital here. And first thing that Violet notices is all the stone has various shades. everything is weirdly pale still on the aisles, right? So the roofs of the structures are pale blue. There's a lot of like pale green grass, stuff like that, muted colors. It's a lot of references to the color.
Yeah, and that's got to come up at some point where they explain exactly the reasoning behind that.
And and I think we're all, as readers, like, we feel like we know it's related to magic.
Yeah.
Lack thereof, been stripped of, coming back, venom possibly. I think we all kind of feel like it's something to do with that. I mean, I think that's somewhat obvious. And I'll be honest with you, I would be disappointed at this point if it didn't have anything to do with
if
that.
we just like go the rest of this series.
Yeah, it was just like, oh no, it's closer to the equator and shit doesn't have the same color here.
They like pastels.
Yeah, I'd be like, dude, that sucks. So they also noticed that the buildings and structures have been constructed to fight dragons.
Well, there's crossbolts here that face in different directions. So different than in Deverelli where they only faced like outwards, these can swivel.
So, and it's interesting because we're flying farther away from the continent, right? Mm-hmm. These isles or this stretch that we're exploring is not like off the coast and then kind of like, oh, well, it's 100 miles off of here and 100 miles off of here. It's not going like laterally with the coast or whatever. You know, Umbriel is a 12-hour flight south, I believe, of the continent. And when we leave here and go
I think it's 12 hours south of Deverelli.
You're right. And when we go to our next isle, not to get ahead of myself, that's 13 hours farther south. They are going like
super far.
They are not fucking close to anything right now, which makes it odd why it would be constructed to fight dragons.
Even better
when we're farther away from the continent.
That's true.
Right? Unless
dragons
we
come
just
from
don't,
different directions.
We don't know yet, but there's more landmass with dragons on the other side.
Yeah.
And
that would be big.
We're getting closer to those dragons.
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying? Crazy shit. We're getting out there some furious.
Really crazy shit.
All right, that's right. So here, like you said, with these crossbolts that can swivel, one soldier can take out dozens of dragons, fighters, or whatever. You know what I mean? You put one soldier on these, and this, just saying what she said also, but I'm imagining it. You got this one soldier that's on this swiveling crossbolt, and you got dragons coming in, and they're just, again, I'm thinking of Game of Thrones type stuff, right?
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're super ready to fight dragons, which would imply that they have seen them before, but then like one of them like pissed themselves when they saw the dragons. So that really made it seem like they had never seen them up close and personal before. So that's just what's interesting, is that maybe it's related to a history that none of the people alive today have experienced, but know about it.
Let me let you know one of my favorite things, and that's when people piss themselves. Because there's nothing that says, I'm scared, like pissing yourself. Because there's no coming back. You can't say words with your mouth. Somebody...
Have you ever peed yourself because you were so scared?
No.
I haven't either.
I don't know. I'm sure people have, been in more terrifying situations than I have.
Right.
But, no. Like, the thought of pissing myself and then trying to act like a tough guy, how do you do that? The first thing they're going to do is point out that you pissed yourself. So either way, we get some more color references, right? So we got some soldiers that are referenced as being in pale green, which you're like, okay, so what? Well, then some are in pale blue with armor.
What's that mean?
Some are wearing all silver, okay? But the emblem of Dune is on all of their chests. So to me, military. All of them are military. All silver. I'm thinking more of like knights, more of, whatever.
I'm picturing all of these like aisles, the way they're described, like this one and Hedotus and stuff like that, as being like Roman, Greek.
Yeah. I see that too. The way the buildings are described.
Yeah.
The colors, like if I close my eyes.
And their clothing, like how they're dressed.
Yeah, I can see that.
All these
the tunics and type of stuff. Yeah, I like that. Like Greek, Roman. I like that. That's good. That's true. So the emblem of Dune, I don't know if this is going to be important or not. I feel like it is. So their emblem is two swords gripped by a claw. And Violet says they have a claw in their symbol, suggesting a common origin. So again, more confirmation that these Isle kingdoms that are fucking far into the ocean still have a connection with the continent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Look at the claw. It's like a dragon claw.
Yeah.
Is that what they meant?
Right. So there's still a connection between them at some point.
Is this different though? Because remember last episode, the one that like woke them up had a horseshoe on their emblem? Because we were talking about like that seems more like Zanal.
Yeah, you're right. I think so. I don't know. Again, I don't think we're supposed to know exactly. I think it's what we're supposed to know is that these are organized militaries on each isle that have their own crest and emblems or whatever that all seem related to what Navarre kind of knows and Pormil, the continent, whatever. Like it's, I think we're supposed to know that there's a related history
and
or
again,
background.
Hopefully we find out that related history. Because again, all of these little clues, if they're not leading somewhere, that's a real bummer.
Rebecca, I need to know about colors and shit. Okay? You out there writing these books, write me a color book. Let me know what's up.
Explain it.
Explain it, please. So they come across a large temple that is as tall as Terran. So pretty fucking tall. And there's 6 pillars out in front of this temple, and they're each carved with different symbols. So the symbols are a sword, a shield, fire, water, claw, and then I think the most interesting, a book.
And she describes those all as being tools of warfare. And I know you're going to talk about that more later.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But I think that's very important, obviously. And before the chapter ends, we see a blue-robed attendant rise from the temple steps. And guess what?
One.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's more than one. It's a group. Yeah. And guess what? They all have silver hair.
And everybody reading that was just so friggin' excited. Yeah. And the fact that you get this little tidbit here, and then just like a couple of chapters later, we get Xaden's mom, was just like this stretch of chapters was just fun. Like jaw dropping.
Yeah, the Isle exploration chapters are awesome.
It's just those are just 2 of the questions that one of the bigger questions. Definitely Violet's hair is probably the biggest question. But then Xaden's mom was like another really big question a lot of people had. So to get both of those close together was amazing.
Very fun, very awesome. I'm with you. And that's it for 30. Right, so let's move on to 31 summary, please.
All right, then. Violet is still reeling about that silver hair when they are greeted by a priestess who has a familiar tattoo. The priestess talks to Dane first, but ultimately Auric, who tries to fight instead of Xaden, but loses that battle. Xaden is ready to fight while the priestess decides he won't be doing so alone. After Violet has a cryptic chat with the priestess, she and Dane both join Xaden in the fighting ring.
This shit caught me off guard. A lot of this caught me off guard. All right, one, did you catch the familiar tattoo thing? Like, was it immediately you knew the connection with the tattoo?
Yeah, because a tattoo on her forehead. Right. Like, that's not
And I did too.
Common.
And I was just like, am I just like ahead of the game? Like, I'm such a good reader now. Check this out. I caught it. Or are you like, no, dumbass? Like, obviously, everybody caught it. Like,
yeah, I think she definitely
it's supposed to be obvious,
emphasized it enough. Sure.
Okay.
But,
yeah. So, would you mind reading the excerpt at the top?
So we're back to this. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Do this.
Well, this is Public Notice 200.417, transcribed by Racel Lightstone. And it says, Guardians are no longer permitted to dedicate children in service to their favored deity. The decision to serve the gods for life must be made after the age of majority and of one's free will.
Dang. And that means basically nothing to us because we don't know shit about any of that yet, right? But it might come up in book 4. Like, it's got to.
Well, we know that this is about her dad.
Yeah, no, I mean,
dedicating her.
But, like, what actually happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're going to find that out. Like, we're going to get the details of that day, why she came exactly, why she didn't stay. Like, I want to know all the details of how that went down.
Of course.
And I think that might be more of a book 5 thing. And that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
So, okay. Before we move on, a couple points to make about the excerpt. Was Asher a guardian? And if he was, guardian of what?
So I feel like you interpreted that, and not, I can see where you went there, is like you're thinking like a guardian of something, like your protector or whatever.
Yeah.
I took it as like a parental guardian.
Okay. So
if that's the case, then like it's just like parents aren't
right.
allowed.
And I think that's likely what it is, but I'm hoping, since it's like fantasy and it's kind of somewhat reminds me of another series, obviously, that we talked about before and read, where it's like a guardian of something, you know what I mean? Like kind of I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything, but either way, a victor. Okay, something like that. Like if you know type of deal.
Yeah.
Guardian of information of a secret or whatever. That's what I hope it is. I hope it's not just like guardian, like I'm her dad.
Right.
But who knows? also, we have the notice 200. Blah 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 blah. Do you think what time frame is this from?
I feel like at some point they say how long it's been since people were allowed to dedicate their children, and maybe it comes later in the conversation with Mira and Brennan, like when Violet finds out a little bit more about that. But yeah, I can't remember if it says exactly how long it's been.
Okay. And then my last question, and I don't think that there's any information on this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Who the fuck is Miss Lightfoot?
Lightstone?
Lightstone. Yeah, sorry.
I'm assuming a scribe.
Okay. Rachel. Okay, Lightstone.
Yeah, I don't know that.
There's no information on this
somebody
person.
important, or if it's just like a random scribe. That's the only mention of her in this book.
Yeah, I looked also, and I didn't find anything on this person previously. And it's a lot of that. It's a lot of just like this name that wrote something that you see once. And there's 3 books out, and we got a whole lot of people that we only see that one time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the end of the series and these people are not important. It's random. Just a name of somebody who just wrote the shit.
I don't think that there will be a degree of that. Like, not everybody can be, super important. The thing that stuck out to me about this, though, is that at one point they're saying that guardians, whether it be parents or, some other type of guardian, were dedicating children to serve for their whole life.
Yeah.
Like, again, that also ties to the other book series, like the idea of dedicating your child
for life,
like for their whole life, making that decision for them.
And what does dedication mean?
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, again, lots of questions. I'm excited. I'm sure we'll find most of those out. Mm-hmm. Probably not in book 4, but I hope so. I didn't think we'd find out as much as we did in Onyx Storm. Yeah, I got so many fucking questions answered.
Yeah,
lots of new questions, but had a lot answered.
Yeah, and that's what I'm always surprised when people say they feel like this was a filler book. And I mean, like, it's got to be some level of like world building and like continuation for a book 3 of any series. But I felt like for this to be book 3, we got a lot of answers I wasn't expecting to get. We met the Irids. Yeah.
We're about to meet
Zayden's mom.
Like, they just random.
Found out at least vaguely the hair, like
some hair stuff. We learned more about Asher. Yeah, like we did get a whole lot in here. We just, again, have more questions that developed from this book as well. So either way, let's get into the chapter. To start the chapter, we start, again, meeting these attendants that we just saw that have the silver hair, just like Violet does. Mm-hmm. But all these attendants have different skin tones, different heights, different shapes, but they all have the same hair.
And again, that's probably because they're coming from all these different places. If these are the ones being dedicated, then they're coming from who knows where.
Right. My belief here, and tell me if this is yours, but I'm with you, right? They're coming from all different places, probably places we haven't been to or know of yet. Mm-hmm. But I think they all had the silver hair when they were born. And if they were born with that hair...
I don't think so.
I don't think that they came here and got the silver hair. Like, I don't believe that Violet didn't have silver hair, came here, and then got silver hair. I think she was born with it, just like these other people were, and they were brought here.
Because they had the silver hair?
Because they have the silver hair. And that is a link to something with Dune. That's what I think. And again, there's no information, like, this is backed by nothing. This is just a theory of how my brain took this and what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'm sold on that, but I'll hear it.
We'll see. Either way, a tall woman and 2 giant twins walk out for this challenge. Mm-hmm. AKA 3 fucking giants walk out.
Like, and we're talking actually giant here. Because it says the woman is the same height as Sawyer or Dane, which, is not short.
6'2", probably.
Yeah, they're all described. Yeah. Maybe not 6'2", maybe 6 foot, because, they're shorter than Xaden, and he's, 6'4"?
Xaden's 6'4", yeah.
But then it says the men are the same height difference from that woman as Xaden and Violet, which Xaden is over a foot taller than Violet. Like, Violet's supposed to be like 5'1".
Are 7 foot tall. Like, they're NBA height.
Yeah.
Big men. Centers in the NBA for all you big basketball fans.
Yeah.
NBA big men, but also trained killers in muscle.
Right.
These are...
Yikes.
You can't win.
Right.
Like, if that person walked into your home right now, you would be fucking afraid. You would piss yourself. Yeah. You would fucking piss yourself if that dude walked in.
Yeah, that would be the moment that you would.
I agree. So... Ark, by the way, apparently just is like, hasn't told anybody, but he speaks fluent Umbrish.
I start to get a little suspicious with this. I assume that the reason he knows all these languages is because he has been taught them as like royalty, is just, diplomatic relations. But there were no diplomatic relations with the Isles. So that was what I was like interested in, is how they were justifying teaching him all of these languages from all these Isle places that supposedly the kingdom has no more contact with.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, that's a question that might not ever be answered, but it could be. And again, we know Holden's out here trying to recover artifacts from their dealings, and we don't have...
And so they obviously did have these relationships with the Isles.
No, we don't have timelines. Mm-hmm. The vibe that I get is that the first time the Venom were defeated, it was with the help from people from the Isles. In some way, form, fashion... I think that that's related, because it's like, oh, well, the artifacts from helping them in the past. So I think there's a possibility that there hasn't been any contact all that recently.
See, I didn't take it that way. I feel like it's been recent. Like, I feel like Holden has been a part of it.
See, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised either way. Again, that's one where I really am confused on, because I just don't have a good pulse on what I think there. But either way, Ark, he speaks some Umbrish. And he tries to be the one to fight. Mm-hmm. And Xaden, obviously, and so is Violet, is like, no, dude, you can't fucking fight these giants.
Yeah. And there was a mention of Tyrandor being, like Xaden says, like, Tyrandor is safe in Bodhi's hands if he falls. Which I feel like those little tidbits make it feel to me like evidence that it's Bodhi is the brother at the end. I feel like that's kind of something I'm obviously, like, keeping an eye out for. And mentions of that, where he's just like very clearly saying, like, if I'm not able to, it's going to be Bodhi, which then is like, okay, well, then why is it Violet?
Right, yeah.
It's because Bodhi's not able to.
Right, and I'm with you. I buy in that it's Bodhi. I'm not convinced that it's not Bodhi and Garrick. You know what I mean? Like, I think I don't know, man.
That would be a plot twist.
I'm waiting for a surprise like that.
Yeah, that would be a good way to do that, because I feel like she, in some ways, made it like almost kind of obvious.
Yeah, you think that it's Bodhi. Right.
To the point where that's either just like, yeah, she meant for that to be the case. She didn't mean it for it to be like too much of a big secret. Or she ends up making it's like, oh, yeah, well, it's Bodhi and it's Garrick.
And I've mentioned that when we had our immediate reactions when we read it the first time and it ended, and we talked about at the end, what did we think? I had said it then that I thought there was a possibility that it's both of them. And I've kind of stick by that. And again, not a whole lot of like, this is why I think that. It's just like, as the kids say, it's a vibes thing, that's how I feel. Mm-hmm. Either way, we meet the priestess. All right. And this priestess has a tattoo of Dune's emblem on her forehead. Violet thinks to herself, she must be at least 75 years old. And I'm like, okay, who gives a fuck? Except for, she then thinks, how long would it take for that tattoo to fade, right? Because Theophany has a faded tattoo on her forehead. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm like, okay, is the tattoo faded because Theophany is that fucking old?
Or is it faded because she's Venom? Or is it
faded because she's Venom? Which was my thought, is that she's a Venom.
Which could be the case. I mean, she definitely jumps to the conclusion that it means that Theophany must be super old.
Right.
But, if being a Venom is kind of like sucking, humanity out of you, that's draining
they don't bleed,
power
right?
And, all of that kind of stuff. And it's obviously like all of their hair, starts to gray and all of that. I feel like that would be kind of normal if the tattoo were to also fade.
Right.
But,
okay. Yes, I'm with you. I don't think Theophany necessarily was super old. I think that it's like, I'm with you. They don't bleed anymore. Like that kind of shit. It just fades because there's not, you're not really like a human anymore or whatever,
And during this conversation, she talks about a storm brewing and that there's thunder in the distance, which I'm wondering, is this there because it makes it easier for her to wield? Like, with less magic, she's still able to produce her lightning? Or is she creating the storm somehow? Like, is this a, manifestation of her power getting stronger or different because she's pulling it from a different source, going with the theory of Andarna's power coming from the sky? Is that there more to that? Like, is she starting to create a storm, or is it a coincidence?
Can I throw something crazy to you?
I love crazy.
Okay. What if what if this storm is being sent here more so to help Violet? And,
by who?
And not by the goddess of Dune, but by Theophany. We've got Venom distance wielders. We have a storm wielder. Arik has precognition.
But why would Theophany be trying to help Violet here?
Theophany could have killed Violet 100 times when she wanted.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that Theophany's bad.
Theophany has been trying to help her. I mean, she's leaving her notes like, hey, I know what you're doing. Just fuck,
I think that there's a chance that Violet's going to regret killing Theophany.
I do too. Now, again, my if I had to put money on it, I think Violet has gotten the storm drummed up, and there could be a connection with the goddess of Dune. It could just be Violet herself because she's starting to get worried. She knows there's a fight coming. She's starting to that power is starting to come around to her right now because she's starting to get nervous. I just think that there's a chance that there's help being sent her way from Theophany still, because Theophany doesn't want her to die. I
think that's a little crazy.
It is a little crazy, but I think that's a possibility. Either way, the priestess says you don't agree with Dune's ways, right? Because they're like, you're going to have to fight to the death.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when she says that, she had dilated pupils, and Violet says, well, I wonder what they're ingesting. And I'm thinking, like, okay, she's immediately sees her pupils. I mean, it's like, oh, they're ingesting something. So, like, some kind of drug, some kind of, like, speed to, like, and again, in real life, certain drugs make your pupils pinpoint, constricted, and some of them make them dilated. Is this something they're ingesting, almost like a speed related, like, power, anger thing? You know what I mean? To kind of get them pumped up before the fight?
I mean, the priestess wouldn't be taking that, though.
That's true. Shit. Yeah, you're right. So why would the priestess be like?
I don't know. And it's kind of like goes into like the next style when they go to Hedotus and they have like the colored, their eye color is like purple. Or
almost so blue it's purple.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but that's normal for us
there.
Here. Because he thinks her eyes are like weird because they're different,
Because they're different colors.
Right, yeah.
And I feel like that has something to do with what they were ingesting too. And I feel like there's little, once we get into that, there's little hints of that in multiple places. But yeah, I don't know. So
let me get this right. Not only are these Isles not having to fuck with Venom and not having to deal with these dragons, but they just get to sit around and do cool drugs all day?
Assuming that it's a cool drug. Who knows?
So far, I'm like, all right, what's up? 13 hours out in the ocean, we just going to eat some shit and our eyes are going to turn purple? And we're like, we don't even fight out in this bitch for real. Like, okay, that's cool. I'm not against that. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the priestess decides that Xaden is not going to fight alone, and she cuts Dane's arm and says that he's going to fight too. And I will say, Dane took this like a man.
He did take it like a man, especially knowing it was a fucking death sentence for him.
Right.
Because it was. We all knew it. Yeah, as soon as that happened, we were like, well, Dane's probably not going to die because she's just, I think we all have the feeling Dane's going to fucking make it to the end and then either sacrifice himself.
I would say so.
Or be one like redeemed character. Mm-hmm. Either way, I think
I could see him going in book 4, but I was not expecting him to in book 3.
I wasn't either. I didn't think that was going to happen. What I did think was going to happen is he was going to get knocked the fuck out, which he did. So the priestess asked Violet if she chose her path, and Violet said, "Yeah, sure did, bitch." And she said, "Well, it's a good thing we didn't complete your dedication." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "What the fuck does that mean?" All right. A whole lot of shit gets spewed in the next paragraph. And I think instead of just reading basically notes and it just being the whole paragraph anyway, we should just read the fucking paragraph. Mm-hmm. And then we'll discuss it. All right. So if you don't mind, love of my life, can you read this paragraph?
So the priestess asks her, but do you not yearn for temple? Usually the touch creates such longing that you can't help but return. Or perhaps you now favor another god. And so she glances up at Taryn, ignoring my outburst, and then her eyes slide to Xaden. I still see us among your potential paths, should you just decide to take it. Dune will accept you. It is not too late to choose her. And she says she raised her eyebrows at the woman. I choose him. And it says whether she's talking about Xaden or Taryn, my answer is the same. And the priestess responds, so be it. Our goddess teaches that while battles may be won by the strongest warriors, they may also be lost by our weakest. Both must be tested today. And then it's obviously when she cuts Violet's arm.
So I feel like that's a very important paragraph. Mm-hmm. And I want to know all about it. So the longing or whatever to come back, like once you're touched, is that a physical thing, like you were touched and now you like physically like always have this thing that's pulling you back.
Well, and Theophany makes a mention later, something like that, about like not being able to go back or...
Yeah, almost like she was sad or just, regretful.
Somewhat.
Somewhat in that way. Is the touch and longing to come and all that because of a informational, like, once you're touched, maybe normally they're older and they can remember more, or maybe she can't remember on purpose, like something has been given to her or done or whatever to prevent her from...
Memories erased.
Yeah, memories erased. I have so many questions, but either way, I just thought that was a good paragraph to read.
And then the other part of it, or perhaps you now favor another god, and she thinks that she's referring to either Taryn or Xaden.
Right.
Like, what does she mean by that?
Like, instead of the actual god, Dune, who's the god, your god is Xaden. Like, you worship Xaden, you worship Taryn. Is kind of, I guess, the reference there.
I don't know.
Okay. Either way, I thought it was a good one. And like you said, she said, the weakest are going to fight today. And she basically gives Violet a little stab in the arm. And Violet's like, fuck me, I got to fight this giant woman.
Right.
And that is the end, because chapter 32 is when some ass whippings are about to start happening.
It is. Violet readies herself for this fight as Dane and Xaden try to think of any way to keep Violet safe. Violet begins her fight and uses her speed and agility to her advantage over her much bigger opponent. It was a close call at one point, with Dane out and Xaden not far behind him, but a skilled dagger throw and a little lightning in the match in Violet's favor. She asks for the 7th dragon breed and an army, and she gets neither. The price for the army is something Violet is certainly unwilling to pay.
That is a very good summary. Also, did you hear my phone fall on the floor halfway through it?
I did.
That was awesome. Again, we have to read them because they're too good. The excerpt at the top of this chapter is from Asher, and we get a little bit of color mentions. So, do you want to give us a read? Love
Sure.
My life. Thanks.
With such wan coloring in the vegetation, it comes as no surprise that it requires 4 times the amount of indigo to dye even the simplest garment. I can't help but wonder if the colors of our continent are the exception or if the Isles are. And that is Unbriel, Isle of Dune by 2nd Lieutenant Asher Dexton.
Right. So what's the deal with the colors? They're acknowledged. Like, hey, yeah, we know. 4 times as much ink to get, it's there, but no more information. I need the rest of these texts. I need Unbriel. I need the research. I need to read Asher's research. I think that's what needs to happen.
And it's again, what it makes me wonder too is if the colors of the Isles are somehow related to like the colors of the hair, like the silver hair.
Right. Yeah.
Does that?
Okay.
Is there a connection between like those two things?
Yeah, I know. And it's just so many questions. Basically, we're spending 40 minutes just asking each other questions that neither one of us know the answers to. And I hope you guys are like, yeah, fuck, let's ask these questions. Because if you're looking for answers,
we don't have those.
We have none.
We have none of those today.
No, we got 2 short chapters left, and there will be no answers in those. However, there will be questions. So either way, starting off, Violet realizes, this plan was never going to be a one-on-one fight of your best combatant. It was never going to be.
There was always 3 opponents.
It was always 3 opponents. There was always going to be 3 people fighting. And then Dorna's pretty fucking mad about it. And Violet says that her anger is mixing with Violet's anger.
And a few mentions of Andarna's like emotions and anger like bursting through in this book, I feel like. But Violet's also complaining of how hot she is like during this. Like she's relieved to get her jacket off because she's like, it's sweltering. And I'm wondering if that's like her power starting to build or if she's just using that as a way to explain like the Isles are fucking hot.
Right. And I have a thing about that. All right. So, and I might as well, because it makes sense now we're talking about it. What's interesting is in the next chapter, we're going to land on hedonism, right? Which is 13 hours farther south. However, when they get there, the weather is changing cooler. And I think we're really fucking hot on these Isles because we're around the equator. And our next Isle, we are coming back away from the equator, going towards another continent.
Interesting.
And I think the weather's, you know what I mean? I think that's a little hidden nugget that's in there.
Interesting.
Is that we've crossed the halfway point and we're starting to work our way towards.
That's some definite geography adjustment.
I didn't want to get ahead of myself, but it made sense to talk about it here. Either way, they get to choose their weapons, and Xaden obviously is going to choose daggers because that's what Violet is the best at fighting with.
And Dane very readily agreed. Yeah. Like, they both are like, whatever's going to make this the best for Violet is what they're both willing to do.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, Xaden, none of them are going to beat their opponents. Xaden will lose. He's outmatched. Dane is losing. He's outmatched. And Violet would lose because she is outmatched, except for she can fucking strike lightning. Yeah. At any point, anyway, like nothing seems to stop her signet. And that power is really what's going to save their lives. So either way, Violet looks for that girl that she had seen with the same hair as her, right? Like there was a little, I think it's a younger girl that was standing there watching. And when she looks for her, she says, movement catches my attention to the right. And when I look at the statue of Dune, I would almost swear her eyes golden and glance my way for a second. And then she shrugs it off as, I wish Andarna would just stay where I told her.
Which is like she's thinking that Violet Andarna has camouflaged herself to look like the statue.
And that the flash that she's seeing and the eyes and all that is Andarna's. And it's possible, right? Because Andarna can do that.
Yep.
That's not how I read it. That's not what I think. I'd be curious if anybody thinks that this is Andarna. Do you think it's Andarna? I'm not saying that it could be.
I'm not convinced either way.
Okay.
I'm not. Like, I feel like it was odd and oddly placed, but I feel like she gave that explanation to say, like, that's what that was. And I can almost see that being something that, like, an editor would help her with. Like, because I feel like, I wonder if Rebecca's feedback, especially with the whole, like, second signet debacle from Iron Flame, where she says she felt like she made it so obvious, that I wonder if there's moments where her editor is going through things where she's like, you know, no one's going to understand this unless you put like a clarifying extra sentence in there. So I wonder if the Andarna thing wasn't there and that's she meant for it to be Andarna. But then she's like, oh, well, you need to add like the comment about it being Andarna so that people understand that's what it was.
And I wouldn't be shocked or any of that.
Yeah.
Because I think that there is a possibility that that's it. But again, if you ask what I really think that it is, I think that's you're supposed to be confused because the Andarna comment. You're supposed to not be sure, and it's up for you to try to guess which one it is.
And so what is it that you think it is?
I think it's Dune watching her. I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is Dune looking out for her. I think it goes against my theory of theophany, but I think it suggests that possibly this storm that just showed up wasn't just brought on by Violet's emotions, that it was brought up by Dune to be for her to draw from, for her to use to her advantage. Again, I've got like 5 different theories. I don't know shit about any of them, but I can fucking shotgun them out there, you know what I mean? And hope one of them sticks. Either way, we start the fight, and Violet's going to fight Marlis, obviously the one female in the group. Marlis, like we mentioned, bigger and stronger, and truthfully probably a better fighter, but Violet is much quicker, and she knows she needs to use speed to her advantage.
She uses leverage.
Which she does. She uses leverage. And she gets Marlis in a bad spot and basically is telling her, you need to fucking yield, right? And Marlis is like, nah. Dane has already been knocked unconscious. He's out, about to be dead. Xaden is losing and about to be killed, right? Yeah. Dane is unconscious and with the dude's boot on his throat, cutting off his airway, and Xaden is trying to stop this dagger from being driven into him.
Which this did strike a little unrealistic to me. These people are such good fighters that they are taking down Xaden, like, you know, no problem.
Seemingly fairly easily.
Took Dane down. He's also described as like a really good fighter. But Violet is taking out their big-ass leader, who's probably, like, the best of them all, you know, like...
Well, this is what I think. I think that their leader's not the best of them all, but she is a trained fighter. She is not used to losing. None of these people would lose, right? The men, let's talk about being realistic. This man is a foot taller than Xaden. Xaden's 6'4". You're talking about a 7'5" muscular trained killer. I don't give a fuck who Xaden is. Guess what? 6'4" is now 5'3".
Right.
All right. Imagine 5'3" fighting 6'4". All right. You're like, oh, 5'3". Xaden's the 5'3". Okay. Yeah. Xaden's taking the fucking ass beating. You're not winning that fight. You can be as tough as you want to. You're not beating a 7'5" trained killer. Like, not happening. With Marlis, She is the queen. She probably doesn't have the exact same training. And I don't know. I feel like Violet is supposed to be portrayed as this person who just continuously gets more and more lethal. And you can't do that if she loses.
Yeah,
to
I mean, the
Marlis.
only thing is I assume Marlis is not used to fighting against someone smaller than her. So it would be a difference and an ability for that person to utilize that to get the advantage.
Yeah, I agree. So either way, the storm that we keep referencing shows up. And we assume that Violet causes lightning to crash.
Yeah.
It might not be Violet, but
we are making that assumption.
We're making the assumption that Violet causes lightning to crash nearby, and Marlis immediately yields, right? Because she's not yielding. She's like, fuck you. I'm not going to yield because Xaden's going to die, and so is Dan. Like, you know what I mean? And lightning changes her mind real quick. Xaden immediately asks her if that was you, you know? And she's like, no, it's just coincidence because there's no magic here. And of course, you're like, dude, stop being dumb. Like, Violet is very smart. You're not dumb. But she thinks to herself, just coincidence or Dune? And I said, why fucking think Dune at all?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like
why is Dune even an option?
They randomly mention the gods, and it's like, they're always like thinking Dune, think Malik, all of those kind of things all the time.
Maybe. Okay.
So, yeah, like, but again.
You think it's like a luck thing?
Is she putting a lot of those things out there so then when bigger ones come up, like, it's more meaningful? I don't know.
Yeah. Again, so many questions.
More questions than answers.
Yeah. I hope you like podcasts full of, I don't know, what you think, because that's what we got. This is where Marlis is kind of unveiled or whatever as the Queen of Umbriel and grants Violet the audience. And you're kind of, I will say, I was just like, oh shit, this queen's bad as a bitch. Like, she's getting out there, mixing it up. I respect that.
She's like, you got to fight me and win, which I'm assuming it means that doesn't happen very often. So, like, most people don't get an audience with her.
Right. Or the ones who do aren't, like, ready for this custom and trained and, like, they just die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nobody gets a fucking audience with her. Well, Violet tells her they've come for two reasons. One is the 7th breed of dragon, and Marlis says, well, if there was such a thing, the Isle hasn't seen fire breathers in centuries. So you're like, okay, well, obviously they're not here.
Which obviously they have seen them at some point.
But they've seen them at some point. The second is they're looking for allies in this fight against Venom. And Marlis wants to know how she wielded the lightning with no magic. And Violet still is like, don't know what you're talking about. That was just
like Marlis is like,
not me.
Jumps to that conclusion right away that that's what that was.
And I think she could see it in her eyes, or like
maybe
I think
because that's the thing. How would Marlis even know what Violet's signet is unless it's like a information that has been passed down? Like maybe she heard from Deverelli. Like I'm not really sure, but obviously like these people don't know her like the people in the
right. Yeah. Again, her name was mispronounced at the last Isle. Sornsail. Again, they're not. Like you said, they don't know her.
Right.
But when Violet says, well, that lightning, that wasn't me. Marlis says, yet you destroyed something that stood for 700 years. 700 just seemed like a interesting number, right? Because Three Brothers was 600 years ago. So we're like, okay, well, if that stood, that means, or if that was from 700 years ago, that means people at least settled here at the Isle of Dune prior to the three siblings. Again, important, but how important, right? Again, we reference this other series, right? And we're not spoiling anything by telling you, like, Blood and Ash, right? There's a series that takes place, and then there's a prequel that takes place 1,000 years prior.
Right.
And there's a lot of, like, I wonder, like, me and Jack, I tell her all the time, like, well, what the fuck happened in between? Like, the 1,000 years. But there is no book. There's a lot of stuff, like, left for you to question, but you just don't know. My thought is that might be possible for here. You might get these references of like 700 years, 1,000 years, and be like, oh, that's going to be great, and never get a single fucking answer about it.
Right.
And it's just be left for you to kind of make up. Interesting stuff. Before the end of the chapter, the queen tells Violet that the price for their help is going to be dragons. And she says that's the same thing that every Isle is going to ask you for. Like, and basically letting her know, you're coming here asking for us to help you fight the Venom to save you and your kind.
All of us are going to want dragons.
We want dragons. Or you're not getting help. And she says, and obviously Violet's like, no, we're not giving you dragons. Because the dragons are saying, no, not a chance.
They're getting pissed.
Yeah. And Queen says, okay, well, then you can use the Isle for shelter. And you can use it for food should you need to rest. You can use us like you used Deverelli. We'll give you the same,
like, privileges.
Privileges. but we're not going to fight with you. If you change your mind, let us know. And she tells her, you give us the dragons, I'll march my army to the continent. So you're like, you know what it's going to take.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what to think. I don't know who to trust here.
Well, especially there's dragon eggs that go missing at the end.
Yeah. Well, guess what? Guess who I trust the least? The fucking dragons.
Yeah.
That's who I trust the least. Okay. Time for the last chapter, chapter 33.
All right. So Marlise doubles down on her request for dragons in exchange for her army. And when Violet doesn't agree, she tells her she'll be coming back when she's more desperate. The dragons are big mad, but manage to keep their cool without eating anybody. And after a day's rest, the gang is headed to Hedotus. Andarna immediately does not like the vibes here, and they all remark on how it's even paler and strangely uniform here on this isle, but don't have too much time to dwell before being greeted by a member of the triumvirate or triumvirate?
Triumvirate? Yeah.
Triumvirate?
Sure.
When he goes on to introduce his wife, we all got one of the biggest shocking moments in Onyx Storm.
Agreed. And I thought it was pretty cool. So I'll read this excerpt. Let's make it even. You read 2, I'll read 2.
This is weird.
It is weird. I have it up. And this is from Colonel Kaori's Guide to Dragonkind. It says, do not mistake a dragon's bond for fealty. If you expect a dragon to choose their rider over the well-being of their own kind, prepare for 2 things, disappointment and death.
Mm-hmm.
So I take this reading, have read the book, as a foreshadow to Andarna breaking her bond, but I don't know, because I know you, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is it's possible that it's Sigale or Terran too, and I know that you have thoughts that it's Sigale, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, the more I think about it, feel like the whole situation at the end where Terran, wasn't reachable to her and, he needed rest and, just what we know as far as, obviously, Xaden is gone away in some way, which means that Terran and Sigale have to be separated. I feel like that's them breaking their mating bonds with each other. But that's not necessarily what this is referencing. This is saying that, dragons are going to pick each other over their humans.
Right. Yeah.
And, yeah, that's scary to me, where it could very well could be that ends up being the case at some point.
And, if you think that they're going to pick you because they've made you feel that way, you're, and not only just disappointment and death, right? Because they don't need you to survive, but you need them to survive, right? If they break their bond, you can die.
And then there was all the other ones, though, that are basically from the human's perspective saying they would pick their dragon over any, human bond.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. So somebody is set up for disappointment here.
Right.
And it's probably not the dragons. So we're still in Umbriel. We haven't flown off yet. But the Queen of Umbriel, like we said, she wants dragons, right? But she doesn't want full-grown dragons, she said, because your kind has let them become too headstrong and arrogant.
Yeah, so she wants eggs because she thinks they'll be more malleable.
Yep, and she wants 12 eggs, 2 of each kind. So ignoring the 7th.
Breed.
Right, ignoring the 7th, she's like, I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. I don't care. 6 dragons. I want 2 of each kind. And she says, and I'll bring my army to the continent. And Violet, of course, is like, absolutely not. And she says, you go ahead and hold on to all that indignation. Come back here when you're a little more desperate. Basically letting her know.
We know that's coming.
Yeah, you can continue on. I think what it's telling them is we know what you're fighting. We know what Venin are, and we know that you can't fucking win.
But at the end, I can't remember. How many eggs is it that are missing at the end? I thought it was 8.
Yeah, it's not 12.
I don't think it's 12.
Yeah, it's not 12.
So I'm wondering, and that's definitely what it makes me think of, is that in some way there was this connection here where that's what they decided to do to get Umbriel's army, is they were like, at the end there when Xaden fully turns, he's like, we need more help.
I think what it says is that 4 of the breeds agreed to give up eggs. And 2 of the breeds said, go fuck yourself.
Interesting.
I think there's 2 breeds, and I think one of them is black dragons.
One of them is blue.
And one of them is blue dragons that said, eat a dick, you're not getting any of our kind.
Or was it oranges? Because we know that
it could be, yeah.
They're a little crazy.
So I think there's 2 breeds that were like, not a fucking chance.
Interesting.
And then again, like we read in the excerpt from Colonel Kaori, she says, they protect their own. They decide it would be worth their eggs to save the rest.
And so that's what you're thinking. And so they do to make that decision.
Yeah. So Mira questions Violet once they come back, right? Because this is ending now. They're basically like, yeah, you can hunt, you can take shelter, but fuck off if you're not giving us dragon eggs. So they get back to the meadow, and Mira questions Violet because she was like, is that you that fucking wielded? Even out here miles away,
And I don't know if it was that, because she said that Kat and Dane told her, Kat and Arik told her what happened.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Violet.
Which, more so, that means that everyone in attendance knew, and believed that Violet was responsible for it.
And that's what's kind of annoying about the whole thing is, again, and we've mentioned before, Violet is very intelligent. She's a very smart person. And at times she's portrayed, and it's more of a naive thing. And it's like, is it blinded by love sometimes with Xaden stuff, or here just blinded by there's no way I'm this powerful person that can wield when nobody else can. Like, you can talk to Taryn. Nobody else can fucking talk to dragons right now.
And you should be questioning that more than I feel like she is.
And you wield lightning or energy or whatever, and you're wielding it out here, and it's just become somewhat annoying that she's so adamant that it wasn't her and the storm was just luck. Because she's smarter than that. She's more intelligent than that. She's more logical than that. You know what I mean? And I know it's just for the story, but I don't like when she's portrayed as not intelligent.
Yeah.
Or logical.
True. I agree with that. And I was wondering about here too is Mira was like very like anxious in this moment, it seemed, and like was like questioning her, like, was it you that wielded? And I'm like, is she just wanting that information because she's curious? Because she's like, oh, you can wield out here? Like, we need to find out what that means. Or is she worried about her having become venom or something and being able to wield, like being a bad thing?
That's a good question. I could see maybe worried about the venom thing because she knows that Xaden's a venom, or does Mira not know?
No, Mira does not know.
Okay, then then that'd be weird to question it because I couldn't remember if she knew or not.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be weird to question it if she knew that Xaden was, because she's in love with, like, don't make a bad decision over love or whatever. The fact that she doesn't know is odd.
Yeah, that she's worried about it. Violet also here asks Mira about her hair and like why her hair is silver. And I feel like Mira should have had an idea at this point, because at this point she's already visited the grandmother and found out about the whole dedication thing. But maybe it's just that she doesn't know about like the people on the aisles, the attendants' hair. Like she hasn't seen that. So she doesn't know that connection and know that that's what the hair would mean. Was that some relation to being dedicated or whatever? Or if she's just still like keeping it from Violet here for whatever reason.
I don't think she's keeping it from her. I think had she saw, because when Violet saw, I can't remember who was around. It might have been Dane, but somebody was just like, and she was like, their hair. And they're like, it looks just like yours. Like everybody noticed and was like, that's really weird.
Yeah.
So I think if Mira had been there and saw it, maybe her reaction would be different.
She would have made the connection.
Yeah, I think so. So we skip forward a day and a half. The Griffins need some time to relax and rest. And they also have a 13-hour flight where they land on Hedotus hedonism. All right, get a little bit of information here. First thing we see is that it has cream-colored stones. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, my mind immediately went to scribes. And I think it's because of the cream color. But
interesting.
Immediately, this place, what is hedonism known for, right?
Wisdom.
And cream-colored, I'm thinking scribes, wisdom. You know what I mean? It's starting. I got some. I don't know what's going on. I got some
wheels
shit.
are turning.
Wheels are turning. But yeah, the vegetation here is described as even paler. It's barely green grass, and like the bark of some kind of tree is white. It's got no color.
She was saying that it looks like Tarsilla, which I guess is something they have on the continent, but it being white is unusual. Right. And Taryn makes a comment that he thinks magic weakens the farther from the continent you get. Which doesn't make sense either, because then when we go to Isles later, there's more magic.
Yeah, and I think Taryn just doesn't know. I think he's like everybody else. They just don't know.
I don't know. I never
Taryn
knows
Taryn doesn't everything, know. And he's just trying anything he can to shut her thoughts down, to keep him at bay, not let her start putting things together. Yeah. Right? Keep her in the dark. And like I said, we've been saying it for 3 fucking books. Something about Taryn. Something about Taryn. I'm saying we love him.
I know.
But he's hiding something. Either way, and Darna, however, is like, I don't like this place, and I think we should leave right now.
Yeah, she's like, not liking the vibe.
She was like, my people would not be here, or my kind would not be here. I don't like it here, and I want to leave.
And that's just based on landing on the shore.
Just landing on the shore, seeing the colors, and whatever feel that she has gotten is obviously making her like, I don't want to be here. I'm uncomfortable.
Which is,
it's a red flag.
It is a red flag. And obviously we don't learn later. They're not good people, but I wonder what it was that she was feeling that made her know that
something made her know that this isn't a good place. Yeah. And that should have been more like...
Yeah, I agree.
Thought about or whatever, taken into consideration. You're looking for her kind.
Yeah, they need to be paying attention to what Andarna says.
Agreed.
They're describing what the rest of what they can see of this city looks like. And it says about Violet recalls from reading about it that 150 years ago, they razed the existing structures that were there and rebuilt them all to be completely uniform.
Which is wild. And I guess in her dad's research, he had mentioned that they built them with intention.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, and I guess the way that's described is whatever is there, they were like, this is bullshit. This is not worth surviving. We know a fight is coming. It is purposely built to fight or to defend, I guess, or purposely built for whatever this specific intention is.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily know that the intention is a fighting thing. I feel like the way what she says here and then what she says to the leader later, I feel like it makes it seem like she's just kind of judging their decisions and making it seem like gentrification almost.
Okay.
As
pushing out the...
Yeah. But I also feel like there could be more to it. Were they at one point attacked and all of the buildings were destroyed and then that's going to force them to rebuild?
Okay.
And so they're just using that as an excuse to hide the fact that it was destroyed at one point.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
She also says it's a coastal city. They're, obviously here, on the beach, but there's no port.
Which is wild.
And all the ships are docked way offshore and they have little dinghies that bring things in.
Yeah. Which, okay, all around the world, there's places where ships, dock out in the ocean and dinghies are kind of all around, but they have fucking ports.
Mm-hmm.
You just might not be able to bring a Carnival cruise ship into it. You know what I mean? It's not that deep. So the fact that there's no way to access this place except for dinghy or air is again, intentional.
Which they mention later, he explains it later that it's because something about fearing the seas and are the unknown of the water or something like that.
Yeah, some bullshit.
But that's weird.
Yeah.
They also acknowledge that one of them is going to have to prove their wisdom to meet with the triumvirate, which they assume is going to be Violet.
Yep. And it's kind of a quick conversation here, but they talk about how, Violet doesn't, but the other group, or people with her inner group, talk about how it's odd that this triumvirate or whatever this fucking thing is weird because it's a group of elected leadership.
Well, it's mainly Kat that says this.
Okay, it's Kat.
She's oh, they don't have royalty that's been trained from birth.
Yeah, right, which Navarre does too.
Yeah, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah,
they're saying that that's the norm and how it should be. They don't basically they don't believe in democracy.
Right, yeah. And that's my point. Yeah, that's democracy and it's weird to them that this, leadership has been elected. It's a democracy.
Which again, the only
which
negative
would make you think it should be better.
And these people are clearly not painted in a good light. They're not good people.
Yeah. Democracy is good in real life.
Yeah.
It's not portrayed well here. I don't know why. Yeah. Not good guys. But Drake and Mira are still fucking arguing, right? Or flirting or whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. But they're having an argument on whether or not a certain maneuver would work. And I don't remember what it was. It starts with a P. But whether or not it would work again, I think it's Pelson or something like that.
Yeah.
Whether it would work against Wyvern. And Drake's I'm telling you it would work. And Mira's no, it wasn't. I have this practical application. I know it wouldn't work. And they keep going back and forth. And it seems like they spend an entire page
on that argument
discussing this argument over this maneuver and whether or not it would work against Wyvern.
I think it's more about them and their relationship than it is about the maneuver.
And that's my thing. This doesn't ever come back up. Mm-hmm. I looked it up. It's not a real maneuver. Yeah. I was pretty sure it wasn't going to be, but I was well, let me make sure. It's not. So is it just a relationship?
I think
thing?
So.
Okay.
It's showing a kind of an enemies to lovers type situation.
And I agree.
Yeah.
But I was, I saw this maneuver and talked about it for a long time. I'm is this going to come back up? Is this how we're going to attack Wyvern? And really, at the end of the thought, I was no, this is just leading to Mira and Drake fucking.
Yeah, that's which really I, for whatever reason, thought that it was going to be more Mira and Serena.
Fucking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could have seen that.
Yeah.
I was, I'd see that more.
Well,
Too bad. I'd rather read about that, to be honest with you. Rebecca,
of course you would.
If we need Mira and Serena to be fucking in book 4, it sure be a shame.
Oh, no.
It sure be a shame for me to have to read about those two.
Oh, yeah. You would be sad.
I'd be so sad.
Well, then a group shows up wearing tunics and gowns of pastel colors. They're all like one shoulder. I'm picturing togas again.
Yeah.
Like I'm picturing all like Greek and Roman stuff.
I would say, did you say that on the podcast earlier, or was that just me and you not on a podcast talking about it? The Greek and Roman thing.
I said it on the podcast.
Okay, yeah. Because as soon as you said it, I'm like, that's all I can picture now.
Well, they're looking at the dragons like in awe. Like they're not scared of them. They're like in awe of them and like wanted to come and see them up closer. And the main man, which we learn later is Ferris, has a bright red gem on his cane, which I felt like we're gem watching.
We're gem watching.
We're looking at all these different examples of gems being mentioned. There's got to be more to them. And this is another one.
Yep. So
which the other the red gem, was the Duchess of Moraine.
So the thought is, where are the gems coming from, right? Are the gems coming from the Isles? Or the gems coming from the Duchess of Moraine? If they're coming from the Duchess of Moraine, that means she has approached this isle, is trying to deal with this isle, trade, barter, whatever.
And there was a venom with the ruby hilted sword.
Yeah, a lot of things we can't trust. Mm-hmm. Also, he has red hair with 2 strips of silver, and there's no more information on after that. I just thought to myself, silver like
graying?
Like violet silver or like graying silver? Because it was just like...
I pictured it as graying
silver. Okay, because it's just 2 strips of silver and not like gray or whatever. It had me question like, okay, is this... I feel like if it was like Violet's hair, it would have been more... She would have noticed more and explained more about it, I think.
Mm-hmm. And he's mentioned to be the second of the triumvirate, and that he, again, has eyes so blue they're purple, and he tells her that this is very common for the Isles.
I'm just saying, I want to try it. I'm sure it's fine.
Something that's going to make your eyes purple.
I bet you it didn't come in a needle. He probably just lifted up some cow patties. You know what I mean?
I'm thinking it's those berry things that they mentioned the birds were eating later.
Okay, and that checks out too.
We'll get more into that, I feel like, in the next episode. But anyway, he introduces his wife, Talia.
Okay.
And Xaden and Garrick both have an immediate reaction and are just dumbfounded. And the woman says, "Xaden, is that you?" And he says, "Mom." And she hasn't seen him since he was 10. So I was kind of just like brainstorming about that, where, I feel like she would have to say, "Is that you?" Because, we have a 12-year-old. And do I think that I would recognize him if I did not see him at all between today and when he was in his 20s? Yes, I do. But it would be that, like, "Is that you?" Like, you're like, this face looks intensely familiar, but obviously completely different at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a weird scene. It's crazy that it ends that way. I'm glad it ends that way, but it is a weird scene.
But he would obviously immediately recognize her because
it's his mom. Yeah.
He's known what she looks like as an adult. So I'm sure she's changed, but
absolutely
not but so much.
Yep. So let's get into questions and theories. So I have a theory. This is my first one. We talked about it earlier a little bit. The Temple of Dune having 6 pillars with the symbols on them, and the symbols were a sword, shield, fire, water, claw, and book.
Okay.
I think these represent the 6 most powerful riders. And these are somewhat of an insight into who they'll be if we can figure it out.
Okay.
So I think I have a couple of them. I think the book is Violet. Okay. I think the shield is Mira.
Okay.
Which is kind of easy. The claw is a griffin rider, because I don't think it's a dragon claw. I think it's a griffin claw. Okay. And I think that's probably Cat. We don't know.
So the 6 most powerful riders included
griffin riders.
Griffin rider?
Yep. I think this is possibly who it is. And I could be wrong. Again, who fucking knows? And if you think the claw's a dragon rider and it doesn't have any griffin riders, then fuck it. All right. But that's fine. I think the book is Violet. I think the shield is Mira. The sword is obviously a fighter, and it can't be Xaden. I don't remember because I couldn't fucking find it, and I was looking for it. In Fourth Wing, when Violet's thinking and talking about fighting and choosing daggers, thought that at some point she referenced Dane as being good with a sword, but it might not be. It could be anybody else. So anyway, I think the sword is a fighter.
Yeah, I think she did. I mean, she's meant, and even in this situation when they were fighting these people, she was saying they were much better with a sword than they were with daggers.
Okay. And again, and who knows, Xaden could end up, coming back by the end of the 4th book, and the sword could still be Xaden. Like, we don't know. So let's say the sword is either Xaden because he comes back before the end, or it's Dane. Fine. All right, we have half of them. Who the fuck is the fire wielder? Who's the water wielder? And then who's the claw? Whether that's... and again, the claw is so hard to represent. My thought is a griffin rider or a flyer. But either way, we are looking for a fire... to support my theory, I'm looking for a fire wielder and a water wielder that are going to be part of here. Now, a water wielder, you're like, oh, they're dime a dozen. There are, but there's only one that can pull the moisture out of a person and kill him. There's only one person.
Freeze it. Like,
because
he wields ice, right?
Yeah.
Not water.
Yeah, same thing though, right? Like, it's still moisture. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think Riddick's not important?
No, I think
he's got to be.
I think he's somewhat important.
Right. So I think
I don't know about 6 most powerful important, but
I don't
maybe.
know. You know, so maybe it's not a water wielder. It's just that's the... Who knows?
The only fire one I can think of is Carr. And I don't feel like he would be one that would be considered one of the 6 most powerful. But obviously he has to have some purpose in this story. So
right. And this obviously is just a theory based on nothing. Mm-hmm. So it probably doesn't make any sense. But that is what I'm going with. I'm going with those 6 symbols represent 6 riders.
The fire also could be related to dragons.
Could be related to dragons, right? Absolutely. So I'm going to keep it on there. I'm going to put it on my ongoing theories list.
All right.
When we're done with Onyx Storm, again, we're going to recount our theories at the end and have actually everything set up so we can reference them and see if we're right. My next one is not a crazy one, and that's just Violet having, connection with the goddess of Dune. And we already read it earlier, but that had to do with the movement that she kind of attributed to Andarna.
The golden eyes on the statue.
Yeah. When she says, and when I look at the statue of Dune, I would almost swear her eyes golden and glance my way. We discussed it, so there's no reason to discuss it again, but I think that is the goddess of Dune, not Andarna.
Okay. The only one I had is really just bolstering a little bit this idea of Violet having magic out here and that potentially being from Andarna's channeling from the sky. Mm-hmm. And she says, rage devours me from the scalp down, storming through my veins, and a surge of heat that sizzles the rain on my skin. The air charges in a way I'm all too familiar with. And that's when lightning strikes to the left and right, which air does obviously charge before lightning strikes, but all of the other stuff combined is all very descriptively similar to how it is when Violet has used her power every other time.
Yeah, it's too similar. It
and how she's
so
not,
similar.
like you said, making that connection is very odd.
I agree. And again, it's just showing itself in lightning all the time. But, I think we're purposely, led to forget that there's a mention that she's not a lightning wielder.
Yeah,
like she's a power wielder,
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. I think good theories there. I do have a little bit of God information in the God mentions, okay? And it is about the statue of Dune. So we didn't really describe the statue of Dune, and maybe it's not important, but it's described as Dune holding a sword, and the sword is pointed at them in her left hand, all right? And the shield that's in her right hand is protecting the temple. So she's got sword in the left hand basically pointing at you like I'm coming to kill you, and then a shield that's protecting the temple. She has long hair that's braided down one side of her torso. Again, we know that Violet sometimes wear her hair braided. I'm just saying, who knows? Maybe that's just a common thing. You tell me. She's also dressed in long belted robes with an armored chest plate. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking old school kind of, you know what I mean? Like tunic almost, like robes, belt across the middle, holding everything tight, chest plate. Seems Greek, Roman type of look.
Yep.
And then again, we mentioned the pillars that are out front with the different emblems. And that is...
Well, and those emblems are on her chest plate too.
Oh, they are. Okay. So the emblems on her chest plate are sword, shield, fire, water, claw, and book. So 6 emblems on her. Okay. Good catch too.
The only other one I saw was the mention of the priestess that she says, perhaps it is truly Zainal who blesses you.
Okay. So maybe it's not Dune. It's Zainal.
Right.
Okay. Good
catch. That was important.
That's right. Okay. What do we got for Art Precognition Watch?
So when he starts to speak up here and he tries to fight instead of Xaden, that to me felt like it could just be bravado where he was like, I'm going to fight, I need to fight for my country, whatever. But when Dane was chosen, Auric really, he steps up extremely quick and said he forbids it and that he'll fight in his stead.
He thought Dane was going to die.
He has a very strong reaction to Dane being chosen. Yeah. And my wonder is, did he see something? Did he see Dane unconscious with the boot on his neck? And he's like, oh, I've got to prevent that from happening.
Okay, I think so. That's a good call. Didn't piece that together, but now that you've mentioned it and I'm thinking about it, it makes a whole lot of sense. I think maybe he did see that, and he thought Dane was going to be dead. Or maybe he saw Dane die, and he didn't see Violet wield.
Right.
Maybe that was
Yeah, but I'm thinking that even if he saw what actually happened, which was Dane unconscious with the boot on his neck, he was probably like, oh, like, this is going to turn out badly.
Yeah, I agree. Good catch. Nothing new for second signet watches, right? Didn't catch anything. There's nobody using signets out in the aisles right now besides Violet. She didn't even fucking know she's using it. So... little geography. We've covered quite a bit during the episode because it just made more sense at times to cover it. Mm-hmm. But here's a few different things that we can discuss quickly. So while we're in Umbriel, some new information that we didn't know until this week was Estol is the capital city, Eistol, and it's been constructed to fight dragons. Mm-hmm. And then we get the emblem of Dune, which was the two crossed swords gripped in the center by a claw that Violet believes has a connection to her own, Navarian emblem.
Which, again, last week there was a mention of one with a horseshoe. So.
Okay. And then once we get to Hedotus, we got new information.
I think.
What is it?
Hedotus?
Hedotus? Hedonism. Y'all know. I don't know how to say shit. So, some new information this week. The capital city there is Vidaris. Mm-hmm. Vidirys. It's a community that is built on knowledge and peace, interestingly enough, and it's referred to as the Isle of Wisdom. Here they have a democracy where they elect people with within high leadership. And then the interesting part that I think, and again we mentioned it earlier, is we continue our flight. Deverelli's 12 hours or so from the coast south, from the continent, 12 hours south to Deverelli. Then it takes us 12 hours to get to Umbriel. Mm-hmm. All right. So 12, and again, we're traveling 200 miles an hour. So we're roughly, what's that? 12 hours twice. That's 2,400. We're 4,800 miles away now.
Holy moly.
Is that right? I think so.
I don't know. That seems like a lot.
Yeah. That 12-hour flight at 200 miles an hour is 2,400 miles. That was from the coast to Deverelli. Another 2,400 miles takes us from Deverelli to Umbriel. 2,600 miles later.
These distances have got to just be intentionally ambiguous.
Who knows? Yeah. And maybe they're flying much slower because they're getting farther away and tired.
And they have the Griffins with them.
They have the Griffins. Mm-hmm. Either way, let's say we cut that shit in half. It's still 1,200 to Deverelli, 1,200 more to Umbriel, and then 1,300 more to Hedotus.
Yeah.
We're still 4,000 miles from the continent.
That's a lot.
And again, the interesting part of it is once we get to Hedotus.
Hedotus.
What do I keep saying? Hedotus?
Hedotus.
I can't say these names. But can we just name it like Washington?
And just keep calling it
Texas, New York. Those I can pronounce those. We get into these. I am way too, I don't have the right verbiage. Or not verbiage. What am I looking for?
Like phonics skills.
Phonics skills? Yeah. I don't have enough phonics skills for those. Either way. What's this place called?
Hedotus.
Hedotus is colder than Umbriel. Again, we mentioned. That's the interesting part.
I do think that's important.
Is that we have crossed some plane on a planet on, you know what I mean? At some point, you can't go in the same fucking direction. Don't get me started in flat earthers. Okay, guys. Let's pretend for a second that the earth is round. You can't go in the same...
pretending that the earth is round. The earth is round.
Okay, we are not pretending.
I know, but the way you mentioned that made it seem like you thought otherwise.
I don't think otherwise. But from what we believe with information is that the earth is round. And if you travel in one direction long enough, you'll do the fucking circle and you'll end up back where you were. Mm-hmm. And we have equators and we have the shit that's going to affect it. This place should have the same stuff. So I think, again, we're coming full circle where we're going to end back up potentially with some fucking dragons on another continent.
That would be very
That would
interesting.
Be sick. No new information on the rest of the isles. Who's that with Jack? Apparently nobody is that with Jack. She's got 0 people to discuss.
Well, and I felt like I could rehash, Marlise and being the Queen of Umbriel or, start to talk about Ferris. But We kind of described them throughout it. It's usually what I'm putting here a lot of times is mentions of people from previous books that I want to remind you about, that I had to go back and say, okay, who do we know that is? So nobody knew this week, maybe some new ones next week. We'll see.
Love it. So, things that Justin had to Google. I had 2 words that I had to Google. And I should have to Google the hedonism word because I can't fucking say that word. But I had to Google flaxen. And the way that it was used is when Violet was talking about Marlis, and she said that she tucks the short strands of her flaxen hair behind her ears. I've never heard that term.
Okay.
So I looked at, and the first thing is flaxen hair. I didn't even look like flaxen, it was just flaxen hair. And it generally describes, things that are made of flax or have the color of unspun dressed flax, a pale yellowish gray. So, and it says uses include flaxen, a variant of the blonde human hair color. It's a gene that causes light-colored manes. So, this is paler than the blonde that we are used to. Again, don't know if that's important. Probably not, but it's a new word that I've never heard of.
There you go. You learned something new. You can start describing things as flaxen.
Yeah, it's flaxen. It's a pale yellow. The other word is triumvirate.
See, I've been saying triumvirate. Am I pronouncing it wrong?
Triumvirate is how it looks to me.
Okay.
What you got?
But press the button to see how it's pronounced.
Oh, yeah. Why don't I just press the button and see how it's pronounced, guys? She's so smart. Let's see.
Triumvirate.
Triumvirate.
So I was saying it right.
Yeah, I should have known you were saying it right. Again, so the first time it's used 1 million times in that last 2 chapters, or the last chapter, actually. But the way it's used first is when Violet's speaking to Riddick when they land at the Isle of Wisdom, and she says, one of us has to prove wisdom to meet with the triumvirate. Never have heard or seen that word. Triumvirate in ancient Rome is a group of 3 men holding power. In particular, the first triumvirate, an unofficial coalition, Julius Caesar, Pompey, Crassus, and 60 BC.
Which are Romans?
Which are Romans. The office of triumph...
For Greeks. Was Julius Caesar Greek or Roman?
He was Roman.
Okay.
I can't say. The office of triumvirate. Well, it's not triumvirate. It ends with VIR. Triumvir in ancient Rome. These are ancient Roman mentions to 3 men holding power.
Hey, which is going right in the line of what I was saying their outfits looked like.
See? How crazy is that?
Crazy.
All right. That is it. New episodes every Monday. Next week, we're going to be covering chapters 34 through 37.
Yep. That's going to be mostly the Hedotus visit. So again, we're just kind of covering one Isle visit at a time. And then 38 would obviously get us to Zelna.
That's right. Not to be confused with Zelda, a sick-ass game from 25 years ago. Other than that, we'll see you next Monday.
See you guys next week.